Hey Pyro, are you alright?
Weird, usually I'm the one asking you that. Why do you ask?
Well, you haven't made a new retrospective since December.
What? Hey there, Pyromaniacs. As you've probably assumed by now, I might have a slight passing interest in a little video game series by the name of Halo. Problem is, the series is experiencing a bit of a dry spell at the moment. Did you hear they finally added Gripball to Halo Infinite? Can you believe it only took them 3 years to add it? Gee, those boys at Halo Studios sure are working at a breakneck pace, I tell you what. So with all this excitement going on with Halo, I can't help but look over at the other similar games under the Xbox umbrella to see what they've been cooking up at the moment. Specifically, I've been eyeing the Gears of War series for quite a while now. Not only is the Coalition working on a prequel game, Gears of War E-Day, but they're also coming out with a remastered version of the first game with Gears of War Reloaded. All this has made me feel like it might finally be the perfect time for me to give these games a try. I've dabbled in the Gears games before, but for whatever the reason, I always ended up bouncing right off of them. But I never really dove in and gave them a true fair shake. And that's what I intend to do here. I'm gonna play through the first Gears of War game from beginning to end, and hopefully by the end of it, I can call myself a true honest-to-God fan of Gears of War. But if you know anything about me, you know I don't like to go into these sorts of things halfway. I needed to know everything there is to know about this game, its development, and the people behind it. So, before we look at the game itself, let's take a short dive into its history. The first Gears of War was actually developed by a company that most people are probably well acquainted with no matter your age. Epic Games. Yep, before Epic was the company known for V-Bucks and Goku doing the Carlton dance over Sabrina Carpenter's fresh corpse, they were known for their high-octane shooters with top-of-the-line graphical technology. Their groundbreaking Unreal Engine and the video game series they made with it, creatively named Unreal, were what initially put Epic on the map as the go-to studio for chaotic land-based multiplayer action, right up there with that of id Software. So where does Gears fit into all this? Well, it all started all the way back in 2001 with the concept for a spin-off to Unreal titled Unreal Warfare. Initially conceptualized as a large-scale vehicle-based wargame similar to Battlefield or Tribes. Although, as technology evolved, the game ended up going through a ton of different revisions over the years. Naturally, they were looking at other upcoming trends in the gaming world, and at some point the team's gaze ended up landing on the over-the-shoulder perspective of Resi 4, and from there considered making a horror game in that same style. Not long after though, they also looked towards a lesser-known game called Kill Switch, which had a cover mechanic that let players duck and snap behind cover. With that addition, it was very clear that they weren't making a horror game anymore. This was now a gritty, tactical shooter with a heavy emphasis on cover, movement, and survival. But that wasn't enough. They didn't want Gears to become a Tom Clancy-style milsim where you just took pot shots at pixels from miles away. They wanted it to be a bombastic and fun spin on the conventions of the tactical shooter genre. They added execution moves, big guns, and even bigger muscles on all the characters, all of which was tied together with the most macho action movie energy they could muster. The end product being a third-person action game with tactical elements that don't feel too intimidating to the average gamer. With Gears finally starting to take shape, Epic needed a way to get it into the hands of gamers. And this is when our old buddy Billy Boy enters the scene. While Epic was still working on Gears, Microsoft was gearing up to launch their next console, the Xbox 360. Thing is, they were kinda starved for killer apps that would differentiate the console from Sony's PS3 and Nintendo's PS3. The 360 needed a gritty, mature flagship title. Something that would show off the console's power and appeal to the now grown-up audience raised on Doom and Halo. Not to mention, they needed a multiplayer game that would hold the attention of gamers until Bungie was ready to put out Halo 3. Meanwhile, Epic had a problem of their own. They were building a game that pushed the limits of console graphics thanks to the newly unveiled Unreal Engine 3, and they needed a platform that could actually run it properly without burning the house down. Enter the Xbox 360, which had hardware well suited for UE3's visual bells and whistles, especially compared to the more complex and notoriously difficult to develop for PS3. It didn't hurt that Epic had already been working closely with Microsoft through licensing UE technology, so Microsoft saw firsthand what Gears could look like, and they wanted it bad. So a deal was struck. Gears of War would become a marquee exclusive for the Xbox 360, and Microsoft would publish the game, give it a hefty marketing budget, and showcase it as a next-gen spectacle to wow the masses. The partnership paid off almost instantly. When Gears debuted at E3 2005, gamers were stoked. People had simply never seen a console game look like that. Cinematic lighting, visceral animations, and environments that looked as real as they were deadly. Fact of the matter is, gamers were hooked before the game even launched. When it finally hit shelves in November 2006, Gears of War was a monster success both critically and commercially. Selling 3 million copies within just 10 weeks, it became the best-selling game of 2006 for the 360, and single-handedly shifted perception of Microsoft's console from the Halo box to a legitimate platform for serious third-party innovation. So, after the history lesson, does it hold up? And more importantly, what does a newbie like me think of this iconic pillar of the Xbox brand? Well, let's finally take a look at the game itself and find out. Gears of War takes place on the war-torn planet of Sera, 14 years after an event known as Emergence Day. On that day, an army of cave-dwelling creatures known as the Locust emerged from the planet to wage war on the surface-dwelling humans that have been bleeding the planet dry of a fuel source known as emulsion. These attacks led to the rise of a new world government for humanity known as the Coalition of Ordered Governments, or COG for short, which promised to fight back and drive away the Locust and take back the surface for humanity. The game is you take the role of a COG soldier by the name of Marcus Phoenix, voiced by John DiMaggio, who you might recognize as Jake the Dog from Adventure Time, Bender from Futurama, or if you're insane like me, Toph from Season 3 Episode 17 of Avatar The Last Airbender. Marcus is a disgraced soldier who is sent to prison for abandoning his post in an attempt to save his father and respected scientist, Adam Phoenix. The game kicks off with Marcus being prematurely released from prison, because the COGs haven't been doing a great job at the whole defending humanity thing and are starting to run low on good soldiers. Shortly afterwards, you're introduced to Delta Squad, the loyal and upbeat Dominic Santiago, the sarcastic and hot-headed Damon Baird, and the gung-ho Augustus Cole, also known as the Cole Train. Over the course of the game, I really grew to like the members of Delta Squad. They're all pretty simple archetypes, but they play their role really well and come off as very charming. My two favorites of the group are probably Cole and, strangely enough, Baird. Cole's character almost feels like he's aware that he's in a video game, if you get what I mean. Always ready to get to the next objective so he can kill more Locust. Meanwhile, Baird is an asshole. Thing is, I'm kind of a sucker for jerk characters when they're done well, and Baird is done very well. I get a lot of Falco Lombardi energy from him, which made his dialogue enjoyable to listen to. Despite always being the first one to complain about a situation, he always makes sure to put the mission first, while also making sure to complain the whole way there. What kinda sucks is that Cole and Baird are very much the minor characters, with more focus being put on Marcus and Dom. Marcus is your typical gruff action hero type, complete with copious one-liners and emotional baggage. As a protagonist, he fills the role fine, and there's enough going on under the hood that he doesn't come off as a generic blank slate. Or at least not too much. Dom, though? I know the sequels do a lot more with him, but here he really just fills the role of Marcus's best friend and not much beyond that. All in all, though, I do like these characters. Archetypical or not, they keep the story moving and their banter feels very realistic and relatable. Speaking of archetypes, the story in the game is pretty bog-standard video game story if I'm being honest. Marcus and the rest of Delta Squad are assigned a mission to map out the underground tunnels that the Locusts call home, in hopes that the COGs can use that information to bring the fight to the enemy's home turf and end this war once and for all. And then you do exactly that and the game ends. But, as I hope I've made clear up until this point, the world and characters add so much to this story that it still manages to pull you in despite the simplistic nature. I want to know more about this world and its characters. I want to see more exploration of the Locusts and their culture. I want to learn more about the dire lives of the human civilians living under the thumb of the COG. It paints this apocalyptic dystopian hellscape, but gives you only a glimpse of the people that have to live in it. But that glimpse is enough to pique your interest. Saying all that, it's no surprise to me that the story and world building were at least in part written by Eric Nyland, who fellow Halo fans know as the man that wrote Fall of Reach and Ghosts of Onyx. Knowing of Nyland's involvement definitely explains why the concept of E-Day feels so similar in nature to events in Halo lore, like the aforementioned Fall of Reach. Like Halo, Gears puts heavy focus on the indomitable human spirit in the face of inconceivable odds. But unlike Halo, there are no super-powered heroes in shining armor to swoop in and save the day here on Sera. There are just soldiers. Soldiers that are treated as disposable pawns by those in power. That's what really sets Gears apart from Halo in terms of world building. Seeing the hopelessness of a ruined world through the eyes of regular people continuing to persevere despite everything they've had to go through. It's actually all really powerful when you look at it that way. But enough about the story. How does the gameplay fare? Well, this is probably where I'm gonna lose some people. I have a bit of a confession to make. I don't typically like cover shooters. I just don't really find the gameplay loop of hiding behind chest-high walls and taking pot shots at other guys hiding behind chest-high walls to be the most exhilarating experience in gaming. So you can imagine that playing Gears of War is a massive step out of my comfort zone since it's the game that popularized cover shooters. I mean, unless you count Space Invaders. That's not to say I don't like cover shooters, period, but most cover shooters I like tend to be in spite of their cover shooting mechanics. I like Uncharted for its cinematic presentation, lovable character writing, and engaging climbing and platforming mechanics. I like Red Dead Redemption for its compelling narrative and vast open world full of side activities. I like Deus Ex Human Revolution because it's Deus Ex Human Revolution. So starting Gears, I was worried that it would lack any of the qualities that make cover shooters bearable for me. Luckily, at least on some level, it does have some cool aspects that I found myself appreciating. Let's just get my personal misgivings about the genre out of the way so I can move on to what I liked. At its core, it's definitely a cover shooter, alright. Despite all the characters being built like walking tanks, you go down very quickly, so sticking to cover is very much mandatory, especially on higher difficulties. In fact, you don't just look like a walking tank, you move like it too. The slow movement speed was definitely something that I had to get used to if I was going to continue to enjoy the rest of this game, and luckily I did eventually warm up to it. The controls feel appropriately heavy for a game where you're playing as hulking soldiers in bulky armor. The sound design really sells it too. You really feel the weight of every single footstep. This weight then goes completely out the door when Marcus effortlessly glides to the nearest cover like a cartoon character to a fresh baked pie. I'm not complaining, of course. I'm glad that getting to cover is quick and snappy, but it does still look a bit goofy when this massive wall of a man defies the laws of physics to slide behind a pile of rubble. At that point, I'm really nitpicking though, and I really shouldn't be. Especially since, luckily, Gears manages to avoid one of the main issues that I tend to have with cover shooters. So many cover shooters almost feel like arcade rail shooters with extra steps, railroading you from firefight to firefight for you to hide behind cover waiting for the enemies to pop up so you can actually shoot them. Gears circumvents this problem by having AI that's actually, well, intelligent. The Locusts don't just hide behind cover until they decide to give you a chance to shoot them, they'll always try to close the gap between themselves and the player. They'll advance on your position, switch cover, and even try to flank you if you're not careful. It really feels like you're fighting against an aggressive yet intelligent regime that wants you dead at all costs. It's all really impressive for a game from 2006. The enemy AI is really what sets Gears of War over the top from just being another run-of-the-mill shooter to achieving the tactical feel that Epic was going for. Another thing that really helps the second-to-second gameplay retain its momentum is the implementation of the active reload system. Instead of just mindlessly waiting for Marcus to slap a fresh mag in his gun, Gears asks you to time a button press during the reload animation for a bonus. Do it right and you get faster reloads plus a temporary damage boost. Fail and your gun jams and the reload sequence takes even longer to finish. It's such a brilliant risk-reward system that turns something as mundane as reloading your gun into a quick mini-game right there in the heat of combat. Of course, you can't talk about reloading the weapons without talking about the weapons themselves. The weapon sandbox for the most part is pretty basic. You have your pistols, shotguns, sniper rifles, assault rifles, grenades, but you also have some pretty unique weapons as well that really define the Gears universe. Notably, the Hammer of Dawn and the iconic Lancer. The Hammer of Dawn is an orbital laser that you can call on to destroy anything in your path. It's very satisfying, but also entirely context sensitive. The Hammer of Dawn only works if the satellite is in the right configuration to fire on your position. In other words, the game only lets you use it if you need it to move on in the story. There are certain enemy types that can only be harmed by the Hammer of Dawn, and whenever you come across one of them, there's always a Hammer of Dawn laying conveniently nearby. The Lancer, on the other hand, is without a doubt what immediately comes to mind when you think of Gears of War. Halo has the Energy Sword, Doom has the BFG, Pokemon has the Pokeball, and Gears of War has the Lancer. What can I say? An automatic assault rifle with a chainsaw attachment perfectly embodies the over-the-top visceral nature of Gears of War. All the weapons, even the absurd power weapons like the Hammer of Dawn, the Lancer just feels the best out of all of them. They clearly knew this gun would be like the lightsaber of this universe and put extra care into making it feel great to shoot. And that's not even mentioning the freaking chainsaw on the end. Whenever you find yourself up close and personal with an enemy, you can use the Lancer Lancer to deliver a brutal execution move that would make Leatherface blush. So yeah, campaign's fine, weapons are fun, characters are fun, but when I said I didn't want to go into this halfway, I meant it. So I made sure not to just look at the campaign, but the multiplayer as well. I was actually pleasantly surprised to see that there were still people playing. What didn't surprise me as much was how brutally the other players destroyed me. While the campaign left me impressed, the multiplayer is more or less what I expected if I'm being honest. More cover shooting, but with the added thrill of other humans outsmarting me. And in a way, that's exactly what I got. As someone more used to arena-style multiplayer games, I was very out of my element here. But for a noob, I'd like to believe I did fine enough in the matches I played. To be fair, I get the appeal. The multiplayer takes everything that works about the Gears campaign combat, the cover mechanics, the heavy movement, the gory finishers, and turns it into a high-stakes game of cat and mouse where every mistake is punishable by a shotgun to the face. Unlike the sprawling chaos of a Halo match, Gears multiplayer feels almost personal. 4-on-4 gameplay with small maps full of tight corridors. If you're on a roll and are suddenly gunned down, you know exactly who ended your streak. It's the furthest thing from Halo. But despite that, I totally understand how Xbox gamers happily played this as they waited for Halo 3. But reducing this game's multiplayer to just the waiting room for Halo 3 is so reductive, because it does stand on its own as a unique experience in its own right. And you can tell that to this day with how Gears, even now, stands hand in hand with Halo as the two major shooter franchises from Microsoft. In the end, I'm glad that I finally gave Gears a fair shake. While I was partially expecting to bounce right off it all over again, I ended up finally understanding why this game earned its place in the pantheon of great Xbox titles. Even with my personal bias against cover shooters, Gears won me over with its weighty combat, memorable characters, and bleak yet fascinating world building. Sure, the story might be a little thin and the movement might be a little bit clunky at times, but none of that stopped me from having a blast gunning down hordes of locusts. And now, I think I get it. I get why this series captured so many hearts back in the day, and why it's become a pillar of the Xbox brand. And with the way the campaign ends, I'm definitely curious about where the series goes from here. And I'm determined to see this series to the end now. With any luck, maybe I'll be a fully initiated fan by the time E-Day drops. But with that said, thanks for watching. If you like this video, leave a like and become a pyromaniac yourself by subscribing. Until next time, stay nerdy, my friends.